Some animals really are dressed to kill. We're counting down the top 10 most extreme fashion disasters in the animal kingdom, in search of the world's most dangerous designs. We'll discover that choosing style over substance can have lethal consequences when fashion disasters are taken to the most extreme.
Earth is a planet of extremes. Extreme places. And extreme animals. But some animals are more extreme than others. Join us as we count down to find the most unusual and the most extraordinary on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 10.
For centuries, people have been dedicated followers of fashion. In the natural world, animals also dress to impress. But sometimes their costumes can be downright dangerous. As we go in search of real fashion disasters, we'll discover that both humans and animals can wear outrageous outfits. Our countdown begins with the world's most extraordinary swimsuits. Back in Victorian England, beach babes were expected to wear full-length costumes of wool or heavy cotton. On land, they protected your modesty. In the water, they were a disaster. How would you like to go swimming in a saggy, baggy wool suit that could absorb up to 22 pounds of water? Well, in South America's Lake Titicaca, this is one fashion that's never gone out of style. The Titicaca frog is so wrinkly, it looks as though it's wearing someone else's skin. And just like a Victorian lady, this frog is a very sluggish swimmer. Anywhere else in the world, wearing such a saggy swimsuit would make you an easy target for predators, but not in this extreme environment. At 12,500 feet in the Andes Mountains, Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable lake in the world. Up here, there's only about a third of the oxygen found at sea level. That means animals find it harder to breathe both above and below the water. And that's where the Titicaca frog's ugly swimsuit comes in handy. Because, like all its cousins, this amphibian can breathe through its skin. That baggy costume actually maximizes the surface area to absorb oxygen. It even does push-ups to increase the flow of water past the skin. The Titicaca frog is number 10 in the countdown because its crazy costume would be a disaster if it was worn anywhere outside its high-altitude home. And as our countdown continues, we'll discover other animals have fashion faux pas that are fatal.
Number 9.
Sticking out at number 9 in the countdown is the porcupine. It wears a coat of up to 30,000 sharp spines. There are 23 different species of porcupines living in a wide range of habitats. But these rodents all have one thing in common. Those spines will deter the most ferocious predator. But even the porcupine can get a taste of its own medicine. That's because although they love climbing trees to get at leaves and soft wood, unfortunately, they're not very coordinated. A bad landing often means a porcupine gets pierced by its own spines. The porcupine is number 9 in the countdown because its coat of 30,000 quills can often cause self-inflicted wounds. So, next time you have a surprise encounter with a porcupine, just remember that scientists have recently discovered that porcupine wounds rarely become infected. That's because each quill is coated with a grease that inhibits bacteria like tetanus and gangrene. So if a porcupine stabs itself, it's less likely to get an infected wound. If only the animals coming up in the countdown were clever enough to carry a first aid kit in their costume.
If our first 2 contenders spiked your interest about animals in unusual outfits, just wait till you see the king of the jungle wearing a wig.
Our countdown of the most extreme fashion disasters now heads down to Muscle Beach, because some females think size really does matter.
Lower, go lower.
We go any lower, we'll cut off their heads.
I'm not interested in their heads.
Certainly, some human males go to enormous efforts to get big and buff. Unfortunately, researchers have found that men overestimate the amount of muscle that women actually find attractive. When scientists asked a group of women what they first looked for in the male body, most bypassed muscular arms or powerful chests and shoulders. It seemed that the most attractive part of a man was his bottom. While human males may not need a strong arm to impress the females, things are very different for our next contender. You can find these guys working out on mudflats around the world. Crawling in to number 8 in the countdown is the male fiddler crab. He has one massive claw that can weigh up to 65% of his body weight. Female fiddlers are more even-handed, but they only have eyes for the male with the biggest claw. The guys show off by waving their claw in the air and tapping the ground. They need to put on a good show because the females are really fussy. Some females have been recorded checking out more than 100 potential partners before selecting a mate. A big claw may be the hottest fashion on the mudflat, but it's also the reason why the fiddler crab is number 8 in the countdown. When the tide goes out, the race to feed is on. The male's massive claw may be sexy, but he can't use it to eat. He has to pick tasty treats off the mudflat using only one arm, so spends twice as long feeding as a female. And on the mudflats, there are plenty of other hungry mouths looking for fiddler crabs that are away from the shelter of their burrows. Obviously, having an enormous limb can cause problems. But this isn't the only time in the countdown that a male will risk death if it means he has a greater chance of attracting a female and passing on his genes.
So far, we've seen that wearing some costumes can be bad for your health. But still to come, we'll discover why you should never wear white in the jungle. And later, who invented the world's most extreme high-heeled shoes? Find out next on Animal Planets. Number 7.
The next contender in our countdown of fashion disasters is an expert at using feathers in eye-catching displays. No other birds can shake their tail feathers like the peacock. That tail can be more than 8 feet wide and contain over 200 feathers. But the thing peahens are most interested in are the bright blue eye spots. Scientists have established that peacocks with the longest, brightest tails and the most spots are also the birds with the fewest parasites on board. By choosing the male with the biggest appendage, a peahen selects a mate with a strong immune system. Scientists have discovered that chicks sired by fathers with more eye spots grew faster and survived longer in the wild. Unfortunately, the male's magnificent fashion statement can also get him in trouble. Sure, he may look good for the girls, but he's still got to be able to fly. If his tail is too big and too heavy, he may find it difficult to get off the ground. And in a land full of hungry predators, that can be a real disaster. While the peacock's enormous tail can make flying difficult, some humans have also had problems walking on oversized fashion accessories. Travel back 400 years to Venice, and you'd find the wealthiest women would be wearing a kind of overshoe called a chopine. Originally designed to protect feet from mud and dirt, these extreme platform soles eventually became up to 30 inches tall. At least the wealthy women of Venice could employ servants to help them totter down the street. The peacock has no such assistance, and it lives in a world where there are plenty of predators just waiting to turn slow animals into fast food.
Number 6.
At least the peacock doesn't have to worry about our next contender. You can only find it in a wildlife park, because while Bengal tigers are rare, white Bengal tigers are even rarer. This male's no albino. He's the result of a genetic mutation. there's only a 1 in 10,000 chance of a Bengal tiger being born white. While visitors love this unique fashion, in the wild, this tiger's spectacular coat would be a real disaster. Those stripes on a normal tiger are there for a reason. They camouflage the big predator as it prepares to launch its devastating attack. But there's no hiding a big white tiger. That's why these freaks of nature only exist in captivity. Strangely enough, there was a time when some humans were also too white for their own good. In Elizabethan England, there were no medicines for skin disorders, and sunscreens were unheard of, so smooth, pale skin was both a rarity and a sign of nobility. That's why the fashionable wealthy hid their blemishes by painting their face white. And the whitest of them all was Queen Elizabeth I, thanks to a mixture of vinegar and white lead. Unfortunately, lead is a very toxic substance, and applying it onto the face could result in terrible sores. So, to cover the sores, they used more face paint. Some have suggested that Queen Elizabeth used so much of this toxic cream that she eventually suffered from lead poisoning. And while the white makeup of this king of the jungle is free of toxins, it's just as lethal. Thanks to their very own genetic fashion disaster, white Bengal tigers can never be released in the wild. But all their adoring fans agree that in this park, these magnificent cats will always reign supreme.
So far, we've seen that white ain't right, and tails can fail. But still to come, we'll discover why fleas flee from the king of the jungle. And later, why would anyone flaunt their fashion in front of a predator? Find out next on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 5.
Not all men have hair as a fashion accessory. But for the next contender in our countdown of fashion disasters, having too much hair is just as bad as having too little. The male lion's crowning glory is his thick, dark mane. For years it was thought that this was part of his sex appeal, which is why scientist Craig Packard decided to make a lion wear a wig. To find the hottest hairstyle, he changed the color and length of the mane on a stuffed dummy.
Okay, Fabio, you're on.
It seemed that no matter what length the hair was, the females consistently selected the model with the darker mane. The theory is that a dark mane shows that the male is in good condition. He's been better fed and is under less stress. It's even been discovered that lions with darker manes have fewer parasites. No wonder lionesses are interested in male fashions. Simply by noticing how an animal looks after its hair can reveal a lot about a lion or a dog. Which is why more and more people are wanting to make sure that their pampered pooch gets groomed by an expert. To meet the demand, students at the New York School of Dog Grooming learn about doggy makeovers under the guidance of head teacher Lisa Buccianti.
She's gonna get a number 4 puppy cut. Okay, so it's gonna be shorter on the body, fuller on the legs. So you gotta get all the curls out. Hi, sweetie. There's just as much fashion in dogs these days as there is with people. You can get everything and anything for your dog as far as coats, hats, jewelry, nail polish. You can dye your dog's hair. Dog grooming is very much like men's haircuts upside down, sort of blending from short to long. We get a lot of people who are hairdressers come into this business because they really don't want to deal with the people anymore.
It's a knot. We gotta get it, bud. It hurts to be beautiful.
And here's Oliver.
Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you so much.
While Oliver may be happy with his new hairstyle, back in Africa, the sexiest lions on the savannah are faced with a problem. Under the baking sun of the Serengeti, a dark mane may attract the females, but it also absorbs much more heat. Scientists have found that males with darker manes were hotter than those with lighter manes. In a cruel twist of fate, the very thing that makes him attractive to females also impairs his ability to create the next generation. It seems that high body temperatures interfere with sperm production, and males with darker manes had more abnormal sperm. This is one time when being hot stuff does not necessarily make you the king of the jungle.
Number 4.
In the Caribbean, they really know how to dress for success. It seems that in Jamaica, the brighter the clothes you wear, the better your chances of winning a mate. Especially if you're a freshwater fish called a guppy. One man who knows all about what's hot in the world of guppy fashion is Greg Grether, an assistant professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of California. If male Jamaican guppies want to catch the eye of the bigger females, wearing large, colorful spots is definitely in.
Male guppies perform a courtship display in which they curl their bodies and hover momentarily in front of the female, during which their color spots are in full view. Female guppies prefer males with larger spots and also brighter spots. But brighter coloration comes at a cost. It also makes males more visible to predators.
Usually, if you get seen by predators, you get eaten. But some males lower their chances of survival even further because these guys play chicken. Imagine if we flirted like Jamaican guppies. A male might be able to catch the eye of a female by wearing a really colorful spot. But to win her heart, he has to prove his bravery. That's why males challenge each other to flaunt themselves in front of a predator. Unfortunately, the most colorful spot may be the most attractive, but it's also the easiest to see, which is why some males find their chances of mating reduced permanently. For some guppies, being dressed in colorful clothes can end in disaster, but at least the colorful spots are their own. Scientists have recently discovered that the courtship of another animal has been spoiled by artificial coloring. For years, scientists have been identifying birds by attaching small, colorful rings to their legs. It's perfectly harmless, except if you're a zebra finch. Researchers have discovered that if you put a red band on a male zebra finch, it has greater reproductive success than a male wearing a green band. It seems that scientists have been unwittingly making some birds more attractive than others. That's because lots of finches have essentially the same body shape, so they use color to distinguish between different species. Finches have excellent color vision, so adding an extra band of color onto the leg of an individual can have a big impact on a prospective mate. Bands of bright color can also end in tragedy for a male guppy. But wearing bright spots is nothing compared to the outrageous costume worn by our next contender.
It's amazing what some males will wear to catch the eye of a female. And the costumes just keep getting crazier when we meet an animal with canine teeth that grow into its brain. And later, why did mothers disapprove of this hair-raising hairstyle? Find out next on Animal Planet's The Most Extreme. Number 3.
The next contender in our countdown of extreme fashion disasters struts his stuff on the plains of North America. This is a male sage grouse. Underneath all those feathers on his chest is a pair of air sacs connected to his windpipe. And when he wants to impress a female, he lets it all hang out. The noise of his popping air sacs can be heard 3 miles away. This strange behavior is endlessly repeated up to 10 times a minute. In spring, male sage grouse get together in the avian equivalent of a nightclub. Unfortunately, female sage grouse are not easily impressed. One by one, females visit the dance arena, choosing a mate based on the quality of his bubbly noise-making and the enthusiasm of his dancing. So the bigger his chest, the more attractive he looks. Strangely enough, there was a time when it was fashionable for humans to inflate the size of their chest. Corsets create an optical illusion. By restricting the waist, they emphasized the chest. And some corsets were very restricting indeed. In the 17th century, a young noblewoman wasn't satisfied until she could encircle her waist with her hands. But even back then, some people realized that this fashion was doing terrible things to women's bodies. In 1874, an article was published listing 97 different diseases produced by stays in corsets. The inflated chest of the male sage grouse also causes problems. It catches not only the eye of potential mates, but also hungry eagles. Thanks to their outrageous costume, males are far more conspicuous than females, which is why many more males are killed by predators. The sage grouse is number 3 in the countdown because so many males are killed that the population can have a sex ratio of 2 females for every male. And unfortunately, things don't get any easier for the males of our next contender.
Number 2.
30 million years of isolation have done strange things to a pig marooned on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. Hiding at number 2 in the countdown is the babirusa. These strange pigs are an orthodontist nightmare. Males fight each other using the short lower tusks as weapons. But they also have 2 crazy canine teeth that grow straight through the roof of the mouth. And once they've burst through the snout, they keep on growing. These massive upper tusks are essential fashion accessories for a male babirusa. If he can keep them sharp and unbroken, it makes him highly attractive to females and heightens his chances of breeding success. But that comes at a cost. The babirusa is number 2 in the countdown because if the male doesn't wear his tusks down or lose them in combat, they'll keep growing into his head. Babirusa skulls have been found where the tusks have pierced the brain case. But this isn't the only time that a fashion accessory has caused a real headache. During the American Revolution, the British fought in red uniforms. It had been a fashion success on the wide-open battlefields of Europe, where a brightly colored uniform meant you could easily see who was on your side. But in America, the rebellious settlers fought in the woods. Here, the British red uniforms stood out like beacons, and worse, those white bandoliers made a nice cross on the front of the tunic. It was like wearing a bullseye saying, "Aim here." Needless to say, the American snipers dutifully obliged. The coat of the babirusa is beautifully camouflaged, so it has no problems blending into the woods. Instead, it suffers from self-inflicted wounds when it gets an ingrown tusk. However, not even these incredible canines can compete with the most extreme fashion disaster in the countdown.
We've seen the 9 contenders. They were all dressed in outrageous costumes. Only one fashion accessory has been a bigger disaster. It's number 1, and it's coming up next on Animal Planet's The Most Number 1.
Our search for the most extreme fashion disaster in the countdown takes us into the strange world of male competitive sports. Because when you're trying to sort the men from the boys, sometimes humans and animals wear unusual costumes. Occasionally, these designs can be useful, especially when you're trying to protect the head. And that's why the animals at number 1 in the countdown wear their very own crash helmets. Deer are nature's own headbangers, which is why they protect their skulls with elaborate antlers. Each year, these branching bony structures grow out of the front of the male's skull. They're weapons used in highly ritualized fights for territory and females. The largest antlers are found on the bull moose, the biggest deer in the world. His rack can be 7 feet wide and weigh 80 pounds. They get put to good use when 2 bulls fight over a female. The flat blade of the antler is a shield, while the prongs are used as spears and for grappling. For male moose, bigger really is better. That's because a dominant bull can sometimes avoid a fight by intimidating other bulls simply by the sight of his rack. And strangely enough, there once was a time when humans also used their head to make an impression. Back in the 17th century, the ruler of France, Louis XIII, was so unhappy that he'd gone prematurely bald that he decided to wear a wig. Soon everybody copied him, and he started a fashion trend that lasted for centuries. Wigs were extremely expensive, so just like the moose, the bigger your wig, the higher your status. Some incredible designs could be piled 3 feet high. Unfortunately, the lack of general hygiene at the time meant that wigs became infested with all kinds of uninvited guests. They were said to literally crawl with lice and even mice. And, according to urban legend, the same thing happened in the 1950s, when trendy women all wanted their hair in a beehive. The beehive hairstyle was hard to create and harder to maintain, so sometimes people left them in for weeks. Back then, mothers would caution their daughters that if they didn't wash their hair, they'd get infected with lice, maggots, or spiders. And now, decades later, the story is back, only this time it's aimed at those who wear their hair in braids. While the moose doesn't have to worry about parasites living in its massive headgear, those antlers can get it into all kinds of trouble. Fighting bulls can sometimes get locked together. their antlers become inescapably entwined, which makes them vulnerable to attack by predators. Or even worse, they die a slow and miserable death from starvation. It's a terrible price to pay for wearing such an impressive fashion accessory. But there was another deer that had such huge antlers that they could have helped cause the extinction of the whole species. The Irish elk was the largest deer that ever lived. Those 12-foot wide antlers were almost twice the size of those worn by a moose today. It thrived during the ice ages of the last million years, but when the temperatures started to warm, the massive deer was in trouble. Some researchers have suggested that those enormous antlers would have been a serious inconvenience in the dense forests that spread northward after the last ice age. And while we can only speculate as to the reasons for the extinction of the giant deer, there's no doubt that its antlers were the natural world's most impressive status symbols. The antlers of the Irish elk joined a group of other fashion accessories that, for better or for worse, we may never see again. Which is why, when it comes to fashion disasters, deer antlers really are the most extreme.